Hello, everyone. I hope you can hear me. This is the second session of this day. It's great to see so many of you participating in this. In this second slot, we'll have two speakers. They'll talk about the problem statement of the whole day, pretty much. I mean, what are the problems if you don't secure routing? And so the first speaker will be Professor Matthias Wählisch from the Freie Universität Berlin. But it's difficult to say a German word in English. And the second speaker will be my colleague Christian Teuschel, who will then show some of the examples that Matthias will describe in and explain you how you can see them in RIPE NCC tools such as RIPEstat. So Matthias, if you're ready, you can switch on your camera and your microphone, and then I'll disappear and share your screen. Yes, I can see you now. I'll disappear.
Okay. So, hello everybody. Also warm welcome from my side to this educational event from RIPE NCC. In this presentation, I want to talk about problems that arise in the context of interdomain routing. So, yeah, let's start with a brief recap about routing and then talk about the security issues that are evident in BGP. So, what is the general purpose and objective of routing? The idea of routing is to enable reachability. And in interdomain routing, you connect two BGP routers, either directly or via a switch. And on top of this, you run BGP, as already was discussed in the previous talk. The idea of BGP is to exchange network layer reachability information between different autonomous systems. And for this, you have an update message that includes an announcement, basically a prefix that you want to make reachable, and an S-pass to reach the prefix. Now, the question is, what might go wrong? I mean, or to achieve this reachability, you need to ensure two things. First, you need to have a BGP connection, a valid BGP connection between these two peers. And second, you need to distribute the correct information with respect to the prefix and the S-pass. Now, what might go wrong? You can break the connection physically by either, I don't know, that the switch goes off, or the cables between the peers break for whatever reason. Or you can also attack one of the routers by, for example, DDoSing the router. And as soon as the routers are not see each other anymore, they are not reachable anymore, they cannot exchange the BGP update message, and then the reachability of the prefix might disappear. So these problems are rather easy to solve. What is more challenging, I mean, you can also attack the BGP session, for example, by breaking the TCP connection. But what is more challenging is that to guarantee the correct information, the exchange of the correct information between these peers. So, and this is the focus of this talk, what I want to let you know now. So what might go wrong by incorrectly changing, or how can you incorrectly announce prefixes based on BGP? And before we start with this, just a brief reminder, why should you care? I mean, by exploiting BGP updates, you can intercept traffic. And this is a problem for two reasons. First, an attacker might do this intentionally to intercept your traffic intentionally to read the data, which breaks privacy. You can protect against this easily by deploying security protocols and just encrypt your traffic. However, encryption does not prevent the second attack, which is more or less a degradation of service availability. So when an attacker intercepts your traffic but does not want to read it or forward it, it can just drop the intercepted traffic. And based on this, you achieve a conflict with the overall goal of the routing protocol, which is enabling reachability of the prefix. And against just dropping intercepted traffic, end-to-end encryption does not help at all. So that is actually the major reason why you should care about traffic interception. Now the question is, how can you do this in by misusing BGP? Which problems arise? The major problem why you can easily intercept traffic based on BGP is that when the BGP was originally designed, is that the assumption was that each peer trusts each other, which is obviously wrong, because an attacker might maliciously announce incorrect data on the one hand. On the other hand, operators of BGP routers might also do mistakes, right? Everything that we talked about before does not need necessarily to be intentionally, but can also be because of misconfiguration. So the assumption that the BGP router announces always the right and correct information to its peer is not necessarily correct. And when BGP was designed, there was no mechanism at all to verify the BGP update. So a BGP peer is able to announce whatever it wants, and the receiving BGP peer is not able to verify the correctness of the prefixes and the S paths that are included in the BGP update. So, now from a misconfiguration as well as from an attacking point of view, you have three options to intercept traffic that you then might be either discard or read or change or whatever. So there are three options. One is the prefix origin hijacking. Then the second one is the S-path manipulation, and the third one is the route leaks. I will now talk about all these three aspects and how to achieve this in practice. So let's start with the prefix origin hijacking. What is it? The idea here is that an autonomous system or peer of an autonomous system announce an IP prefix that it does not own. So with respect to the S path, on the most right-hand side of the S path, there is an autonomous system that is not the legitimate owner of the IP prefix. The second threat is S-path manipulation. What does it mean? This means that an AS, that the origin of the AS path is correct, but an AS in between the origin and another receiving BGP peer change the AS path compared to what the original traversal of the BGP update was. So, for example, it either includes its own, attacking or misconfigured AS, either includes its own AS number in the AS path, even though it never received the BGP update for the specific prefix, or it just removes existing AS numbers that have been on the path already. Oh, okay. Let's give some more concrete examples. So our topology for this is the following. We have an original as Z that owns a prefix. It's 10.20.00/16. And this Z is connected via several other ASs. And we have two providers, A and B, that also connected, both connect the same customer. And the customer, some end device in the customer AS wants to reach an end host that has an IP address out of the prefix 10.20.00/16. So in the first step is the first scenario that we want to consider is that ASZ announce this prefix only to a single upstream, which is ISV. So ASZ sends an update containing 10.20.0016 to ASV. ASV propagates this to its provider, which then provider A, and provider A propagates this prefix to the customer. So the customer gets only a single pass to this prefix, which is ABZ, and then obviously selects this pass because it wants to reach and enters in this prefix, and then makes in the corresponding routing entry, a forwarding information base, and then traffic can flow from the customer to any enters in the prefix of ISZ. So what might now go wrong is that another IS announced a more specific prefix. So for example, ISY, for whatever reason, either misconfiguration or by malicious intention, announced the prefix 10.20.00/24 to ASX, which then just distributes to ASW and then to the provider, the customer, but in this case provider B. And finally, the customer gets two prefixes, one with a length of 16 bits and one with a length of 24 bits. And very most likely, if there are no specific policies configured in the customer as, this additional pass prefix is added to the forwarding information base of the customer. So as soon as the packet in the customer as arrives towards 10.20.0024, it will select the customer as will select the pass via provider B to ASY instead of selecting the pass via provider A. And in this case, so this is a quite simple approach to attract traffic to a more specific prefix path, which is already announced, so more specific prefix path. And so ISY gets the data or part of the data for the full prefix, and then either can drop the traffic, read it, or forward, whatever it wants. So that is an issue. Now let's consider the second case that not a more specific prefix is intercepted, but the same prefix. How do we achieve this? Again, in this, we now extend the scenario a little bit that ASZ is not only propagating the prefix announcement to ISV, but also to ASY. And then the customer again receives two passes for the same prefix, and then selects very most likely, if you do not configure specific policies, the prefix with a shorter pass. So in general, the shorter pass wins. And now provider B wants to intercept all the traffic. What can provider B do? If the policy is the shorter pass wins, then it can just shorten the pass. So provider B received the prefix from ASZ via W, X, and Y, and then just removes the whole pass and prepends its own AS to the empty pass, and then prepends Z, which means the origin is still correct, but the rest of the pass is incorrect because Y, X, and W are missed. So very likely the customer will then select the incorrectly announced pass because it's shorter, which means that the traffic flows via provider B instead of provider A. And this holds in particular if provider A is able to announce incorrect data prefix only to the customer and not to the upstream nodes W and X. So you might ask, is this a real problem? Yes, it is a real problem. This kind of hijacking, either origin hijacks but also sometimes path hijackings, but in particular origin hijacks, occur quite often. There are some prominent examples. I mean, not all of the incidents make it to the press, but the prominent doing this. One is the YouTube hijack in 2008, where the Pakistan Telecom was incorrectly announcing a more specific prefix out of the YouTube range to the upstream providers, and these upstream providers didn't check the announcement but just distributed further, and finally this incorrect path with an incorrect origin was more or less propagated in the whole internet, and then the node in the internet wants to reach YouTube actually ended up at Pakistan Telecom. Pakistan Telecom was blocking the traffic. So another example is in 2010, where China Telecom announced roughly 40K prefixes incorrectly. That was not only, I mean, most of them were not more specific prefixes, but the actual correct prefix length, but with an incorrect origins. In this case, China Telecom instead of the original origins. Another example in 2017 was the Russian routing leak, where Russian AS announced 80 prefixes incorrectly, which have also been distributed in the internet, and these most of these prefixes then went for a short time offline. The examples that I presented you before conceptually are actually happen in the real internet. And as I said before, I mean, these three examples that I illustrated here are just examples. There are actually much more in real world and in real life. Hijacks, in particular origin hijacks, happen daily. You can easily prevent these incidents by proper filtering, either via the RPKI or other data. But note that RPKI provides you cryptographically strong filtering. So let's come to the last problem, which is the route leak. Here's the idea that an autonomous system does not change the S path, but it announces a prefix to NAS in the sense of the conflicts with the original business expectation, right? I mean, in proper prefix origin validation, the S path manipulation, both change the actual BGP update. In the route leak case, the update is not changed, so the IS path in the update is still valid, but it was sent in a way that was not expected. And why is this a problem? Because very often routing policies reflect business decisions. So what does it mean in practice? In practice, it means that a provider, very most likely, not always, but quite often, prefers customer routes over other routes. So let's consider the case where in our test scenario or example scenario here, customer C announces the prefix of Z to its provider B. This means from practical point of view that the customer now offers transit to its provider B for this prefix, even though the customer C is actually, based on the business decisions or negotiations, actually is the customer request a transit from provider B. But in this case, the customer C offers also transit to B. And considering the case when a provider always prefers customer routes over all other routes, provider B in this case would accept the route from customer C, and the router will select the path via C instead via W, X, and Y. And in this case, that's very important to note, customer C was not modifying the BGP update in any sense. So the IS path is still valid because C was getting the update from provider A, B, and Z and just distributed further to B. And we selected the path not primarily because it's shorter, but because of the business decisions and the routing policies that customers are preferred among provider announcements. And this is a problem that you cannot easily solve based on route filtering. For this, you need more complex information. Actually, the peering policies to verify if the expected announcement complies with the actual announcement that the IS receives. Okay, to summarize, BGP prefix, we have 2 or 3 issues. One is prefix origin hijacking, IS path manipulation, and route leaks. All of this is doable because BGP is based on trust. In the original specification of the BGP router is not able to verify the information that is part of the BGP update. It cannot verify if the prefix is correct, if the IS path is correct, if the origin of the prefix is correct. You can exploit this trust assumption either by maliciously announced prefixes and incorrect IS paths or just by misconfiguration. It might also happen. And these incidents actually are part of our daily life and may very often lead to unreachability of prefixes, which means that you cannot reach the end host of the incorrectly announced prefix. And this conflicts with the whole purpose of the internet, which is achieving reachability of end hosts or enabling reachability. So to prevent this, we need proper mechanisms, and this will be the rest of this webinar. And you will now hear something about how to monitor the internet routing, to identify incorrect announcement, and you will also learn something further about current and future solutions that actually prevent prefix hijacking and IS path manipulation. Okay, that's from my side. Thank you. Thanks a lot.
Thank you very much, Matthias, and thanks for doing this good transition to the next speaker. Next speaker will be Christian. We're not going to have questions now because we won't have time, but it would be great if you could stick around till at least the end of the session, Matthias, in case there are any questions for either of you, Matthias or Christian. So Christian, if you're ready, then please go. Can I unmute you?
All right, perfect. So first of all, can you hear me loud and clear? Yes? Okay, perfect. All right. So my name is Christian. I'm the person behind RIPEstat, and I think by now you absolutely know about routing, thanks to Ferenc and Matthias. And I can go to a bit more practical approach with one of our tools. Let me quickly tell you about the agenda. So we're going to start with a quick overview of what RIPEstat is. Then I'm going to talk about the routing information system, also very briefly, followed by routing insights via RIPEstat, and then we finally conclude with some examples of routing security related issues that we can see via RIPEstat. First of all, what is RIPEstat? And this is the slide where I personally promised myself that I keep it really short, because I think I could talk for hours about that. So the one-liner is RIPEstat is a large-scale information service and the open data platform of the RIPE NCC. So this is very theoretical. More pragmatically, it means RIPEstat is an interface. We try to be one interface to a whole lot of different internet-related data sets. So at this moment, we have around more than 20 different data sets that are combined in RIPEstat. And during the next slides, whatever I show you can also follow if you're going to go to stat.ripe.net. And then you can enter either an IP address, a prefix, ASN, a country code, or a host name. And then you will be presented with the results based on all the different data sets that we're going to combine in RIPEstat. One of these data sets is the routing information system data. And the routing information system data is, as the name implies, is very relevant for this topic today. It is, in a nutshell, it is a network of measurement probes, so PGP route collectors that on different locations, predominantly IXPs, we're going to peer with other networks to share their view on the internet. And in numbers, that means that we have 19 collectors all over the world, and we have more than 160 full table peers. If you want to have more information on the RIS system itself, then go to ris.ripe.net. Then we're going to continue with routing insights via RIPEstat. The most important data set related to routing is being shown if you're going to enter a resource on RIPEstat in a tab that is called routing. And there we're going to combine all the different views on routing data that follow certain purposes. And each of these purposes that we're going to show with RIPEstat, they're combined in so-called widgets. And what you can see here, for example, is the routing status widget. Altogether, we have more than 20 widgets that are related to routing data. Some of them only for prefixes, some only for ASNs. And the list would be definitely too long to go into details about each of those. So that's why I created a hand-picked list of 3 widgets that I want to present today. And these are BG Play, the Looking Glass, and Routing History. Let's start with the Looking Glass. So what is the Looking Glass? The Looking Glass in itself, the term might be very common to many of you. So it allows to gain insights or a view into the routing table of a router. And with the Looking Glass widget in RIPEstat, it is not different, just that it is based on all the different RIS peers that we have, and that's more than 160. What you're going to see in the Looking Glass, if you're going to enter a prefix, and this widget only works for prefixes, then you're going to see the announcing network, so the ASN number, which if there is no hijack involved, should always be 1, apart from some exceptions. Another thing that you're going to see in the Looking Glass is the AS path, and the previous presenters already talked about the AS path and the announcing ASN, so I'm going to skip that here. Another important part of the Looking Glass is that it is close to real time. So that means that when an event is happening on the internet, until you can see it in the Looking Glass, in the RIPEstat Looking Glass, it's about 5 minutes. And if you're going to download the slides, then you can just click on that link and you're going to see the example that I'm going to present in the following screen. And in this example, I used the prefix, one of the prefixes that the RIPE NCC is announcing, that is 193.020/23. And what you can see in the output is that we have 19 locations. So these are these 19 ROCs. They peer with 172 full table peers, and that's why we're going to see 172 full peers appearing here if the visibility is 100%. And then we're going to have the information as a breakdown in a tree structure for basically every peer. And then you can see more detailed information like this one. Part of this more detailed information is the IP address of the next hop, the peer, BGP community, and the AS path, and when it was last updated. But I'm gonna invite you to just click and follow the example in the slides and explore for yourself. The next widget is the routing history widget, and as the name implies, the routing history widget provides historical information. And that historical information is visualized in swim lanes that are a combination of the announcing ASN plus the prefixes from this ASN. And we use also some color coding to present the visibility of this ASN and prefix combination. And that color code goes from red to green, meaning that green is being seen by all of the full table peers, which is the highest visibility. This becomes clear if I'm going to show you this screenshot. Here you're going to see all the prefixes announced from the from AS quad 3, which is the ASN number of the RIPE NCC, and you're going to see it over time. And you have multiple features how to filter that. I'm not going into details about that, but what you can see here is that on the x-axis you're going to see the time, and then on the y-axis you see the prefixes splitted into ASNs, and that in itself is very useful for network operators to see when their prefixes are being announced or have been announced and when not. But on the other side, and that's why I love the creativity of our community, you can also see it as a canvas. And that was, for example, done by Job Snijders. By changing the announcement of a couple of prefixes, he were able to draw this neuron cut in the routing history widget. All right, then let's go to the next widget, which is BGPlay. BGPlay is a very popular widget on RIPEstat, and it allows a visual representation of the routing status related to a prefix. If we're going to go to the example, you see more what I mean with that. But what's important is that BGPlay in one view will show you a snapshot of the internet status at one point in time. And with the widget, you will be able to move in time backwards and forward. As a simple example of a prefix, I again use the prefix of the RIPE NCC. I would like to highlight the main points of this widget. First of all, in the middle, you're going to see this spiderweb visualization of the routing status and the connections between the different networks related to 193.0.20/23. The nodes in there, so the nodes represent networks with, again, color coding. The originating ASN is color coded in red. And with this information, you immediately know that if you don't have a hijack case, then you should only see one ASN, again, with certain exceptions. The blue ones, these are our peers of the WIS system. And everything else, all the other nodes colored in black, are nodes that are on the AS path between the originating ASN and our WIS peers. And that gives us basically a good introduction for the next use case. And this is going to be presented in the live demo. So that is the YouTube hijack, which happened in February 2008 by Pakistan Telecom. And right now I'm trying to load the widget for that. So what you're going to see here right now is bgplay loaded with all the prefixes that were relevant in this incident. And let me start with the beginning of this incident that was on the 24th of February 2008. We're going to start at 5 p.m. in the afternoon. And at that time, YouTube was announcing a prefix which was 208.65.152/22. And you can see that here. So the ASN number of YouTube back then was 36561. And then a bit later, we're going to replay right now the events that followed, especially at 1847 UTC. And just to show the feature of bgplay to replay these events, I'm going to hit the play button, and then you immediately see like path changes away from the YouTube ASN to the Pakistan Telecom ASN with 17557. The animation in itself, I think, would right now take a little bit too much time, so I'm gonna pause it here and just jump to the dominant events. The dominant events were that 80 minutes later, YouTube reacted on that hijack event and started to announce the same prefix. And that was 208.65.153/24. So what we have heard from previous presenters, that is a more specific prefix, and that's why it attracts more traffic towards that. And that happened around here. And what you can see is that some paths are moving back to YouTube. But right now we have kind of a path situation because we have two prefixes of the same size being announced by two different ASNs. So what YouTube did around 11 minutes later, they announced an even more specific prefix, which was 208.65.153/128/25 and the corresponding 0/25. And we can see what will happen then. So we see even more paths being attracted by the YouTube ASN. And luckily, at 1:09 p.m. at that day, the upstream of Pakistan Telecom PCCW Global withdrew the prefix that Pakistan Telecom initially announced. And then what we can see is that everything goes back to normal. And here we're going to see 17557 being standing alone for this prefix as it should be. Then I think we can go back to the presentation. I think time-wise, are we all right? Perfect. So that means that we can also add another example that I wanted to show, and that was the internet outage of 2012 in Egypt. So if we're gonna click on the link, actually that was in 2011. That was kind of a mistake in the slides. Sorry for that, but here it should be corrected. So what you're gonna see in this widget, which is called the country routing statistics, is aggregation of resources that are being announced, so are seen in the routing table related to a specific country. And what we're going to see here is the very popular event of the internet cutoff in Egypt during the Arab Spring, where you can see that the number of IPv4 prefixes suddenly dropped for a prolonged period of time. And this widget basically gives you the overall view for quite a long period of time. And I can show you that by clearing the zoom, and then you can see the development of the internet prefixes, the number of internet prefixes related to IPv4, IPv6, and the ASNs for Egypt. And that widget basically works also for all other countries. So be my guest and just try it out. that brings us, I think, to the last part of the of my presentation, and that is related to what I wanted to add about RIPEstat, because what we have seen so far is only one aspect of RIPEstat, because we developed 3 different interfaces to RIPEstat. So the first one, as you have already seen, if you're going to click on one of the slide links, is RIPEstat web. So this is basically when you're going to go to stat.ripe.net and see the web page. The next one, you have already seen that in the widgets, but there is another layer which basically builds or fuels all the other widgets. So every widget that you're going to see, all the data that is being presented there is also available as a data API call, which is structured in a JSON RPC call. And that makes it very easy for you to build your own application, or for example, take the Looking Glass and put that into a Singer or a Nagios plugin, and voila, you have a very simple and effective way to monitor for hijacking of your IP space. And then last but not least, here are some links to documentation. So you're going to find the documentation for the data API, for the widget API, and all the information about what RIPEstat is and what it follows. And that brings me to my last slide. If we're going to have any questions, then yeah, I'm happy to answer that right now. If we don't, if the questions don't fit into this session right now, then feel free to just drop me an email or follow me on Twitter or connect on Twitter with me.
Thank you very much, Christian. Are there any questions for either Matthias or Christian at this point? Please type them in. I see some people are typing. Thanking Christian to start with, and then see if there's more coming. People just thanking you. That's very kind. We have a few more minutes. So I'll wait a few more minutes, but and just to let you know, at 11:45 we'll have a 15-minute break for everybody, you listeners, and also us here in at the RIPE NCC and all the speakers, and then we will start again at I was going to say 12, but I should probably say UTC. That's 10. With the next slot about the actual building blocks to solve some of the problems that have been presented here in this slot. Someone is saying, Christian, YouTube /25's thought most providers filter on /24 or larger. Do you want to comment on that?
Yeah, absolutely. I'm gonna comment directly without typing. So that is true, and that's why because when YouTube tried to announce the more specific /25, it was not that effective, because many providers are filtering on the /24, and for YouTube there was not so much to do to make it more specific. So finally the solution was resolved when the upstream of Pakistan Telecom withdrew their /24 prefix.
I don't see any more questions at this point, so thank you very much. I hope we'll all see you again after the break. Bye for now.
Goodbye.